Welcome back to Today Assets Report, the only channel that gives you the real institutional picture of what is happening in global finance before it ever hits mainstream news. I am genuinely glad you are here right now, because what we are about to cover today is the kind of information that most people in your circle have absolutely no idea about yet. Brad Garlinghouse has made statements recently that have quietly sent shockwaves through institutional finance. And when you stack those statements on top of everything else that has been happening behind the scenes with XRP, the picture that emerges for 2026 is one that most retail investors are simply not prepared for. So stay with me through this entire segment, because by the time we are done, you are going to see this market in a completely different way. Let us start with something that most people watching crypto content have completely missed. The Bank of England, one of the most conservative and respected financial institutions on the entire planet, ran a proof of concept using Ripple's infrastructure. Now think about what that actually means. This is not a regional bank experimenting out of curiosity. This is the Bank of England, an institution that has survived world wars, global financial panics, and the complete collapse of entire monetary systems. When they test a piece of technology, they do it with a level of seriousness that very few organizations anywhere on Earth can match. A proof of concept means they brought Ripple's technology directly into contact with their own systems, their own security requirements, and their own compliance framework. And the answer that came back was clear. It works. For XRP holders who have been patient through years of waiting for this kind of institutional validation to arrive, that is not a small moment. That is the moment the thesis starts becoming undeniable. Now here is where things get even more significant. The Bank of England is not alone. Australia's central bank is actively testing XRP ledger infrastructure. Japan is running its own central bank evaluations. JP Morgan, one of the largest financial institutions in the United States, has been running tests on the XRP ledger. MasterCard, used by hundreds of millions of people every single day, has been involved in testing as well. Look at that list and really let it register. These are not fringe players chasing speculative technology. These are the institutions that manage and process the movement of money for most of the world, all of them converging on the same infrastructure at roughly the same time. That is not coincidence. That is a structural shift happening in slow motion right in front of us, and most people are completely asleep to it. Brad Garlinghouse gave a reference point that reframes the entire size of this opportunity. The total crypto market right now, every coin and token combined, is worth about $2.5 trillion. Sounds big until you compare it to traditional finance. Bank deposits, stocks, and bonds represent $400 trillion. The global private asset market adds another $290 trillion on top of that. You are looking at a financial system more than 200 times the size of the entire crypto ecosystem, and a growing portion of it is heading on-chain. The institutions deciding which blockchain infrastructure to use for that migration are the exact same ones running the tests we just talked about. That is the scale of what XRP is positioned inside of right now. Garlinghouse specifically called out G-Treasury, a platform serving Fortune 50 and Fortune 500 companies managing global payment operations. G-Treasury currently processes $13 trillion in payments. Garlinghouse said he believes 30% of that $13 trillion will move on-chain within 5 years. Ripple's XRP ledger and RLUSD stablecoin are already integrated into that platform. This is not a prediction about what might happen someday in theory. This is infrastructure already deployed, already connected, already being used by corporate treasury desks managing billions in cross-border payments every week. The crawl phase has already begun. The walk phase is coming faster than most people realize. Here is a real example of the problem being solved. A treasurer at American Airlines making a fuel payment into Peru today faces a 4-day settlement window. 4 days. At one of the most recognizable airlines in the world. And the cost is controlled by whichever correspondent bank sits between them and the destination. Sometimes there is only one option available. One bank, 4 days, at a price you cannot negotiate. Blockchain eliminates that entirely. When a corporate treasury dashboard shows a 4-day legacy route next to a minutes-based blockchain option at lower cost, that decision gets made once, and then it becomes the permanent default. That is how adoption actually happens at institutional scale. Not all at once, but consistently, quietly, and then suddenly everywhere. The real-world asset data on the XRP ledger is the part of this story that most people are not tracking closely enough, and it might be the most powerful evidence in the entire thesis. The XRP ledger's tokenized real-world asset value grew 246% year over year. In the same period, Algorand fell 79%. Aptos collapsed 41%. Even Ethereum, which dominated institutional blockchain activity for years, is losing market share in this category. The XRP ledger now sits in fourth place globally for tokenized real-world asset value at around $4.8 billion and climbing. When you see that kind of growth, while every major competitor is declining, you are not watching a trend. You are watching a structural realignment of which infrastructure institutions are actually choosing. Ripple's chief counsel described the offering clearly. If you are a company and you want to bring crypto into your operations for payments, custody, tokenization, liquidity management, or treasury management, Ripple has built all of it inside one integrated stack. One provider, one compliance review, one vendor decision. For institutions with complex internal approval processes, that integration is frequently what determines which provider actually gets selected. It removes vendor risk, simplifies legal review, and shortens the procurement cycle dramatically. In enterprise technology, that kind of unified offering is not a minor advantage. It is often the entire reason a deal closes. Brad Garlinghouse said something about time and expectations that I think every XRP holder needs to carry with them going into 2026. People dramatically underestimate what can happen in a decade and dramatically overestimate what can happen in a single year. For anyone who has held through the skepticism, through the family members who thought it was a long shot, through the financial advisors who had never heard of it, that is not just a motivational line. It is a precise description of how every major infrastructure transition in history has actually worked. The early believers in internet infrastructure, in mobile payments, in cloud computing, all went through long stretches where the thesis was intact, but the mainstream had not caught up yet. What looked like stubbornness was foresight. That moment of confirmation is now arriving for XRP in real time. The full picture, when you hold it all together, is impossible to dismiss. The Bank of England tested Ripple. JP Morgan tested the XRP ledger. Australia and Japan are running central bank evaluations. Ripple was present in White House discussions on the Clarity Act. Ripple was in the room during US-UK transatlantic financial infrastructure meetings. The XRP ledger grew tokenized real-world assets 246% year over year. G-Treasury, processing $13 trillion annually, already runs Ripple infrastructure. This did not happen by accident, and it did not happen overnight. This is more than a decade of methodical positioning by a company built for institutions from the very beginning. The thesis is not just intact going into 2026. It is being confirmed in real time by the most serious financial institutions on Earth. Stay informed, stay positioned, and we will see you in the next one right here on Today Assets Report.